Hello guys, welcome back to YT Classroom. I hope you all are doing well. Today we'll be solving IGCSE Computer Science 0478 Paper 2 Variant 2 from Feb-March 2025. This is a 1 hour 45 minutes paper and it carries 75 marks, which makes it 50% of your entire grade for the IGCSE syllabus. And this paper is primarily based on chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, and the main topics will be pseudocode along with databases and logic gates. Let's get along with this paper. If you're new to this channel, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more helpful content, especially for the May-June 2025 series. Alright, in this paper, I'll be solving all of these questions and explain them to all of you in depth so that you guys have no doubts after this video. I hope you find this video helpful. Alright, let's start. Now, we have got question number 1 here, which is an MCQ question, and what does it say? It says that tick one box to complete the sentence. A standard method of solution used to find a piece of data in an array is A bubble sort, B counting routine, C linear search, and D selection search. So basically what they're telling us is what method do we use to find a piece of data in an array. A bubble sort is basically to order the elements in an array in order of increasing order, that is ascending, or decreasing order, that is descending. So that's definitely not an answer to this question. A counting routine is basically used to count, let's say, how many values have been input. So every time there's a value or a data input, you just increment it. So that's not for finding it. On the other hand, we have something which is called as linear search. And linear search is basically the standard method for this. The answer is linear search because in linear search, you go to every data element and check whether that is the data element is the one are you searching for. So obviously the answer would be C for the first one. And the algorithm for linear search has been taught to you previously and is included within your syllabus. Tick one box to complete the sentence. The pseudocode to store a hotel name held in the variable name to the text file is. So we have a text file and we also have a hotel name which is stored in the variable name. And we want to write this hotel name in the text file. So obviously for that the command would be write file. So A and D cannot be the answers because it's read file and store file. Now write file is followed by the name of the file that we want to store the data. So it has to be hotels.txt, comma, the data that you want to store. That is either it can be in quotation marks in the data itself or it can be the variable name with data stored. So the answer is B for this part. So with this, we're done with the first two questions. The first one's answer is C, second one is B. Now let's move to the third question. 4 development life cycles and 5 descriptions are shown. Draw one line from each stage to the most appropriate description, and not all descriptions will be used. Alright, so basically you have to match, and there are 5 descriptions, you only use 4 of them, 1 will remain. So what is meant by testing? Now testing is easy. It basically is to make sure that the program is expected. So you test the data and you test the program to make sure that it gives us output which is desired, or it just works properly. Analysis. Now analysis is the first stage of the program development lifecycle, and it involves identifying the problem and the requirements. That means why are we creating this program exactly, or what is it supposed to do? Now the coding is actually where the main part is, and this is where you actually develop the program in the programming language. So it would be using a programming language to create the solution. And the last part is design. So design is actually like last question, but it's before the coding, and this is where you plan how to code the program. So you use something which is called as structure diagrams, flowcharts, and pseudocode to plan the solution before actually going to the programming language to code the solution. So this is the answer for this question. I hope this question is clear as well. Now we'll move on to the fourth question. The first question says a presence check is a type of validation check. State the purpose of a presence check. Now basically the purpose of a presence check is to check that a value has been entered. To check that a value has been entered. So often when you fill out forms, you would see a red arrow on, like a red star on some of the criteria, some of the fields, and this basically means that you have to input some data there. That is basically presence check. That means a data item has to be there. It cannot be submitted, or the data cannot be processed without that data item. That's why we have presence check. A value input to a computer system must be an integer. Identify the validation check to test whether the value input meets the requirement. Now since the value has to be a specific data type, we can use something which is called as type check, which checks whether it's an integer or it's a string, it's a real value or boolean value, etc. Next up, we have a 5-mark question for pseudocode, so please be very careful with this. Write the pseudocode for an algorithm to allow a number to be input into an appropriate variable. So we have to first of all allow the user to input a number to a variable and check whether the number it is an integer or no. If the number is an integer, it is accepted. Well, if it is not an integer, then you'll output an error message and the re-input of the number is required until a valid number is input. So now after reading this question, I can get somewhat of an idea that what I have to do. First of all, because it says you have to repeat it until the valid number is input, I do not know how many times I have to repeat, but it has to repeat at least once. So I will use my repeat until loop. The next thing to understand after we know that we have to use a repeat until loop is that how will we check whether the number input is it an integer number or not? For that, we can use something like this. Let's say mod of the number comma 1. So what you're doing is we're dividing the number with 1, and if it returns as a remainder, that means if the remainder is 0, if it is not 0, that means it's not a whole number. For example, if you do 10 divided by 1, 10 divided by 1, you would get the answer as 10 with no, let's say, decimal points. So the remainder is actually 0, so mod would return 0. Let's say if you do 10.5 divided by 1, the mod will give us the answer as 0.5 because that's the remainder. So in that case, that's an error. And this is how we're going to check whether the number is an integer or not. You will get it much more better when I do the problem. So first of all, we're going to start with a repeat until loop. So repeat until loop always has to start with repeat, repeat. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to basically, you can put a prompt message, but that's not necessary. So I'm going to skip that part. Input a number. Input a number. So basically here we get the number from the user. Now we have to check whether the number it is a whole number or it is an integer or no. If the modulus is the mod of number comma 1, okay, I have to put number, not number comma 1 is not 0. So that means if when we do the modulus and for example the number is not an integer, so the modulus of 1 it would result like in a value which is the decimal point. It would not give us 0. So if the modulus does not give us 0, then what we're going to do is then we say output. Now we have to tell the user that you have made an error. Output, please try again. Please try again. And there's no if-else condition, so we're just going to write end of if. And when do we repeat this until? So we repeat this until the modulus of the number comma 1 it is equivalent of 0. Again, you have a repeat until loop, and I hope you're clear why we use repeat until loop, because we don't know the number of repetitions, but we do know that it has to repeat at least once. About input number, we ask the user for a number, and when we do the modulus of that number, basically dividing the number by 1 and seeing the remainder. If there is no remainder, the program terminates. But if there is a remainder, that means that it is an integer, and then you'll have to basically give the user an output message that you have made an error and try again. All right, now let's move on to the next point, which is question number 5. Now in question number 5, it says that a program is written to only accept data that contains more than 9 characters. So this is our condition that has to contain more than 9 characters. The program needs to be tested. The table, when completed, shows appropriate data types that match the type of test data and the purpose of test data. So you just have to fill out this table. Now remember, the program only accepts data which is more than 9 characters. So they're given a test data which is ABC. ABC is less than 9 characters, and it is not even close to the boundary, so it is an abnormal data. Abnormal data. Now what is the purpose of an abnormal data? The purpose of an abnormal data is then to make sure the program rejects data that is too short. So any data that is too short should be rejected by the program. Program rejects data that is too short. Any data that is too short should be rejected straight away by the program. Example ABC. Next one is boundary data. Now what does a boundary data mean? Basically it means that, for example, it could be 9 characters. So 9 characters is 10 characters would have been accepted, but 9 characters should be rejected. So here we need something which is of 9 characters. Maybe I could say password, because I think password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, it has 8. Let's say password 1. So password 1 would be a boundary data, and what is the purpose of this is to basically make sure to make sure the program rejects data. Program rejects data that is only, or that is just too short. That is just too short. So basically, even if you add just one more character here, it would be accepted. And this is what it means by boundary: one below the like the minimum requirement, or one above the maximum requirement. Other times you have something which is called as extreme. So extreme would be, let's say, 10. That means it is just on the point of passing. So 10 would be accepted, but 9 would not be accepted. And what about this one? Here they're giving us a description to make sure the program accepts it at the appropriate length. So obviously this has to be the normal data, which is greater than which is basically greater than 9 characters. For example, I could say YT classroom. So YT, which is 2 characters, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let me just count. So I got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 characters, that means it has to be accepted. Alright, I hope this is clear. Now let's move on to the next question. The next question is somewhat over here. Sorry for that. So we're going to move to this question. I hope the previous one was clear. Abnormal data, boundary data, and normal data. And this is often a very repeated topic. So please make sure you study this topic well. Now here, the pseudocode algorithm is intended to allow 1,000 positive integers to be input and stored in a one-dimensional array. So you're asking the user for 1,000 positive integers and you're storing them in an array. The integers are added together as their output and the highest value is identified. So as the integers are being added, as their input, you add them together and you will obviously identify the highest value. At the end of the algorithm, the highest number, the total, and the average of the numbers are input. Very simple program. You ask the user for 1,000 positive integers and you store all of them in an array. At the end of the program, you identify the highest value, the total value, and the average value. So this is often a very common program that you find in many of the papers. And now they have said that identify the line numbers of the 5 errors in the pseudocode and suggest the correction. So there are 5 errors and we have to identify them and correct them as well. Let's start from the first one. The first one they have done is that declares a number as an array of 1 to 1,000 of integers. So obviously this is correct because it's an integer and the size is correct as well, 1 to 1,000. Declare the highest as a string. Now why would highest be a string when it is supposed to be an integer? Because it stores an integer value. So this is an error. Point number 2, it is an error. Declare count as an integer and declare total as an integer. So both of these are correct. Highest is 1500. Now there is something important you have to learn here. Whenever you're comparing a program, whenever you're making a program where you calculate highest and lowest, the highest value should be set to the minimum. For example, since it says positive, I could set my highest to 0 and the lowest could be maximum. For example, I could say 9999999, as large of a number as you can think of. So that next time when I compare, for example, my first value input, it is 10. I will compare with this 0. And if it is greater than this, obviously, which it will be greater, then I will assign the new value to the highest. But if it is greater than 1500, for example, if it is 10, the value input is 10, but it will still say the highest is 1500. So it is wrong. The highest has to be the minimum value. Total is 0. Okay. Now, the next thing it says is for count from 1 to 1,000. I'm repeating it 1,000 times. That's correct. Input the numbers count. So automatically the user's input, it's assigned or saved in the numbers array. Total is equivalent of total plus count. No, this is wrong because total should be equal to the total plus the number that has been input. So here you should have put this part, the number counter, it should come here. It should not be count because the count would be, let's say, 1, 2, 3, etc. Not the number that has been input by the user. After that, we see if the number count is greater than total. Okay, this is for the comparison between highest. If the number count, that means the number that has been entered, is it greater than total? No, it doesn't have to be greater than the total. It has to be greater than the highest value. So even this is wrong because this part is wrong. Then highest should be numbers of count. You're assigning the highest value to the numbers count. That is correct. Okay, and if next count. So that means still line 14, then there is no error. Then you go to line 15, which says output the highest number is highest, output the total is total, output the average is average divided by 1,000. So first of all, we do not have a variable which is called as average, so that's a mistake. And anyways, even if you have calculated average, that means you just had output average, not average divided by 1,000. This should rather be total divided by 1,000 because we do not have a variable called average. So line 17 has a mistake. So the lines that have a mistake are 2, 5, 9, 10, and 17. Let's write them down. So line 2 has an error. What was the error in line 2? That it was declare highest as a string. It should be declare highest as an integer. declare declare highest as an integer, because it stores an integer value, so it has to be an integer. Moving on, this is line 2. Next one, we have line 5, which says highest is 1500. It should be 0. Line 5, the highest is 1500. The highest should rather be 0. You can set it a negative value as well, but as if you think about it in a logical manner, the program only allows positive numbers to be input, so I take it as a negative value. So I've got line 2 where the highest should be an integer, and line 5 highest should be 0. Now line 3, error number 3, it was on line 9. It was on line 9. And what is the error over here? It is basically that it should be total plus total. Total is total plus the numbers count. Total is total, which was the previous value, plus numbers of count. That means whatever the value has been entered, you have to add that to the total, not the count value. After that, there was one more error in line 10. And what is that error in line 10? It is basically if the number count is greater than highest, not greater than total, but greater than highest. If numbers of count, that means whatever the number it has been input, it should be greater than highest. And there was a last error at the end, which says output the average is average divided by 1000. It should be the output is average is total divided by 1000. Line 17, and the correction is output the average is, and what would the average be? It would basically be the total. I have to put a comma over here, total divided by 1000, because we had 1000 numbers input. So this is the code. If you want to refer to it as well, you can take a screenshot, and these are the 5 errors that I have identified. Okay, now we'll move on to the next question, which says write pseudocode statement to output the average of the numbers rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so let's say it, now remember we do not have an output variable, so we're going to say output Now, in order to do this question, write the pseudocode statement to output the average of the numbers rounded to 2 decimal places. It would basically be output the round of total divided by 1000, comma 2. Now basically round is a program or a function that you can use. It takes 2 parameters. The one is the value that you want, and the followed by how many let's say decimal places you want to be. So total divided by 1000, it will give me the average, comma 2 means 2 decimal places. Now let's move on to the next question. Explain how you could change the corrected algorithm so that it also finds the smallest number that was input and outputs its value at the end. Any code used must be fully explained. So here it's just asking for explanation, not the actual code. Remember that if you want to find the smallest value, the first thing that we have to do is declare a new variable for smallest value at the start of the program. So first step would be to declare a new variable for. Why do we need a new variable for? We need the new variable for the smallest, to store the smallest value. And where would declarations be? Obviously at the start of the algorithm. After that, now remember, just like highest, first of all we declared it, we need to set the smallest value to the highest possible value, right? Initialization, we need to initialize the smallest variable, initialize smallest variable to a high number. Let me explain why is it like this. For example, if you put the highest value as 99999, And then your user inputs a 10. Obviously, the 10 is less than 999, so the smallest value will automatically be replaced by 10. So that is the second step. The third step would be we need a new selection statement after the input to compare the input to the. So we need, like, for example, if statement. So we need a new selection statement. New selection statement. Now, where would this selection statement go? It would go after the number has been input. So after input. And why do we need this exactly? To compare. What do we need to compare? To compare the input with the smallest current number. To compare the input with the current smallest number. Current smallest number. So this, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at the program, first of all, it has this part, right? It has this part where the number is compared for the highest, if number is greater than the total. So rather it would be if the number count, it is less than the smallest value. If it is, then the smallest value, like this part, it is replaced by smallest, is numbers count. That is what meant the selection statement. So my fourth is, the fourth would be in the selection statement, it would be like a small part of it, which is if the input value is smaller, we need to change it, right? So if the input is smaller than the current smallest variable, if it is smaller than the current smallest variable, it should be replaced. Obviously, if it is smallest, then it should be replaced. And the last part is you output the outside the loop, you output the current value of the smallest variable, which is pretty obvious that you need to output the value. So outside the loop, make sure it's not inside the loop, otherwise it will keep outputting the smallest value at the end of each loop, which means 1,000 times. Outside the loop, output the current value of the smallest variable. Output the current value of the smallest variable. I hope I'm very clear with my explanation along with these points. Now let's move on to question number 7. The question number 7 says the flowchart represents an algorithm. Let's have a look at this algorithm. I bet this is a trace table. Yes. So you can see complete the trace table for the input data. Let's have a look at the trace, like the flowchart algorithm first, so that we can get a rough idea of what you're supposed to do. And this might be my tip for answering these sets of questions. Get an idea, because these are often very simple and basic programs. First one, it says start, and then you output something which is continue question mark. Then you say input the answer. So you're asking the user for an input. If the user says yes, that means you go ahead. If the answer is yes, like why, that means go ahead, yes. But if he says no, then you stop. Okay, that's pretty clear. Then you're asking the user to input a value 1 operator and a value 2. So you're asking the user to input 3 more things. Now, if the operator is A, then you're adding both the values. If the operator is B, S, I mean, so you're subtracting both the values and you're outputting the values as well. Output the value, like carry out the calculation, output the value. If it is M, then you're multiplying, otherwise you're dividing. So it's pretty obvious. First, you ask the user for a continuation. If it does, then you ask the user for an operation along with 2 values. That means it's basically performing the function of a calculator as per you see. Okay. Now they say that you have to complete the trace table for the input data. If you check all the way from the start, we see that it starts with something which it starts with an output. So that means the first step would be to put an output over here, that is continue, along with the question mark. Then it says you input the answer. So for the first answer, they have said it has y. I'm going to put a y over here. If it is y, then what do? We input value 1 operator and value 2. Now value 1 is 7, the operator is s, the value 2, it is 9. Now if you see the operator is s, then what do you output? Value 1 minus value 2. What is 7 minus 9? Negative 2. Okay, now we'll move on. Again, continue is going to be outputted then, continue. Now after that, what are you saying? Okay, I have done y, 7, s and 9. Then again I have y, so that means yes, you want to continue. You have 5, m and 12, so 5, m and 12. Now what does m mean? I think m means multiplication. Yes, so 5 into 12, which is 60. 5 into 12, sorry, 5m 12, which is going to be 16. Then again you're going to ask him for continue. This time he has again said yes. So you're gonna put it over here and it says 25D5. So 25D5. What is that going to be? 5. Okay. Once you've outputted it, then you again ask for continuation. 25D and then 5 as well. After D, you inputted 5 as well. Now this time they have said an N. And what does an N mean? If the answer is not Y, that means no, you stop it. So this is where you have to stop. Do not use the values ahead. That could be a mistake. Now it says state the purpose of the algorithm on page 6. As already told, the purpose is basically that it is a simple calculator to perform arithmetic operations, but a calculator would just be fine. Okay, the next one is there are problems with the given algorithm. If the lowercase letter y is entered for the answer, the algorithm stops, and if the lowercase letters entered for the operator, the algorithm gives an incorrect output. Explain how you would change the algorithm to prevent the problems described. Now, the problem they're saying over here is, for example, you would want the operator to either be A, S, or you could say M. But what if the user accidentally enters A, S, or like small letters of these? Shouldn't they also be accepted? And even if you see here, it says only accepts capital Y. So they want to change it so that it accepts small y as well and small letters of these as well. Now, in this case, there can be two possible solutions for this. One solution could be that after you've done both of these processes, right, you have asked the user for the answer value and you have asked the user for an operator value. Like, for example, after the answer, you're going to capitalize user's answer using uCase function. So, for example, if you enters y and if you have a process here that says uCase of this, that means the answer will automatically be y. Rather if it is small or big, I mean capital or small, it would be capitalized. And even for all of these, the operators, you would just capitalize the output. That would make it easy to check. Another thing that you can do is that you can change the conditions. So is operator y or y, is the operator a or a, is the operator s or s, and similarly for all of them. It's two conditions. Either you capitalize the inputs or you change the conditions. I'm gonna say that like changing the conditions sound better to me, but I've suggested both the solutions and both are there in the marking scheme. So my solution is would be to basically change the condition in all the 4 decision boxes, change the condition in all four decision boxes. And what are the decision boxes? What do you want to change the condition for? For the variables, answer, and operator. I've changed the conditions for all of these for answer and operator. After that, once I've changed the conditions, what do I want the conditions to look like? The example could be using or, that is answer is either y or answer is y. So in this case, you're accepting capital Y and small y, and so would it follow for all of the three. Again, two ways to do this. Either you change the decisions like accept small and capital, or you capitalize all of the inputs and then you check them, or maybe you can even lowercase all of the inputs and then maybe you could change all. That would be a longer method because then you require to change the decisions. Two methods only. One, you change the decisions like and accept both of them, or you just capitalize the input and then check it. Identify one more error related to inputs when the algorithm is on. Now, when you do this, you will identify that for division, they're not actually checking. So they check for addition, they check for subtraction, check for multiplication. But if they're saying that if it's not addition, subtraction, or multiplication, it is division, which could be wrong. For example, what if the user has not entered D as well? Or what if it does not want division? What if I entered the incorrect thing? So that means it is an error because you're not checking for division, but you simply provide an answer in division. Shouldn't there be like an output message that says invalid operator if you have not chosen A, S, M, or D? So that is why I'm going to say that the algorithm we have, it only tests for A, S, and M. It is only testing for these three, A, S, and M. Any other input is assumed any other assumed is and any other input is assumed to be D, which is basically for division. Okay. Now this is one error that I've identified that you're not checking for division. Another error could be division by zero. So that means division by zero is a runtime error, but you're not checking for that as well. And sometimes you might enter a wrong data type. For example, in this you're required to enter integer, but what if the value one is not an integer? Are you identifying it? And what if there's no data entered? Are you notifying the user? No, you're not. So this is why there are a lot of errors in this program, and one of them has to be identified over here. Then it says the database major city stores details about the number of cities from around the world. So if you have city code, the city, is it a capital, whether it's true or false, the country, the continent, and the population values. It says state the number of fields and the number of records in this table. The number of fields are like the number of columns, which I can see as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let the number of fields be 6. Now the number of records, be very careful while counting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So obviously the number of records is 23. Identify the field in the database table that is most suitable to be the primary key and give one reason for your choice. So here they're asking us that which field would exactly be the primary key for this field. Now what is a primary key? A primary key is basically a field which is unique to every record. That means if you just say that value, you'll get the whole record. It will never be repeated. For example, you cannot take the capital as a primary key because it is repeated so many times. Neither can you take the country or maybe even the continent because they are repeated. But if you see the codes, the city codes, all of them are actually being unique, which means to identify every field, every record uniquely. That's why I'm going to take the code as my primary field. The primary key field, it would basically be code. And the reason is that it is a unique identifier for each record. It is a unique identifier for each record. Now here it says give the output from the SQL statement. They've given us SQL statement and they want us to give the output from the SQL statement. Select city, country, and population. So you only have to display these three from major cities. So that's the table where the continent is South America. And this is one of the conditions and order by population. First of all, let's check which all have the continent as South America. I'm going to highlight that for you. Okay. Now where is the continent South America? So this is continent South America, this one. Where else is continent South America? It is this one. And do we have any more? So we have this one as well. Yeah, these three are the only ones to the South America continent. We have to sort them out order by, it said order by what? Order by the population. So if you do order by population, it would be, so if you see Buenos Aires, if I'm saying that right, it's in Argentina, a population of 15.4 million. Lima in Peru, it is 11.2 million, whereas Valencia in Venezuela, it is 1.9 million. So this has to be the first one, this has to be the second one, and this has to be the third one. Now remember, we are only supposed to display what? The city, country, and population. The city is Valencia. City is Valencia. The country is Venezuela. Venezuela. And the population is basically 1,983,445. So 1,983,445. The second one, it is basically Lima in Peru. So I'm going to say Lima in Peru, where the population is basically 11,206,000. I'll just show you over here as well. 11,206,000. Next one, Buenos Aires. So that is BUENOS Aires in Argentina, with a population of 15,490 and 415. All right. We are done with this part. Now it says complete the SQL statement to list only the code, city, country, and continent. Code, city, country, and continent. These are the fields that you write of all the cities in the database table that are capital cities. So what you want to display is select the code, city, country, comma, the continent from, that is your condition, from, no, I mean that's the table name, from major city. So let me just show you what they're trying to say over here. We have this field which is called as the code. So we have one field which is the code field, code, city, and the country along the continent. We're going to display all of these for the cities where the capital value, which are capital cities, that means the capital value should be true, right? From major city where your capital value, capital should actually be true. I hope this question is clear as well. Now we'll, and this like for databases topic, it's a very easy topic and a very easy to score topic. Obviously there will be one question in the exam for databases, so please do learn this thoroughly. Okay, so we have got this over here. We have got this. Okay, I think, yeah, I had tested this out previously, but I'll explain again as well. Yeah, okay, so here we've got a question from the topic of logic gates. Okay, logic gates. So this is a topic which is, again, there will be one question in every paper on this topic, and it's very easy to understand and very easy to score. It has, for if you see this question, 9 marks very easily. So consider logic expression Z, the output is A NAND B XOR not of not B NAND C. You might be confused about this, so let me just break this down for you. The Z value, it is decided by a final logic gate of XOR. In this XOR logic gate, the one input that you pass is A NAND B. The other input that you pass is the not of not B NAND C. So first you do not B NAND C, whatever the output is at, you do the not of that, and then you pass that to XOR gate. So I often like to do these questions in the reverse manner. I would draw a XOR gate first. XOR gate first. Okay, this would be my XOR gate. Now remember, the gates are something that you have to remember. They will not be provided, and they're not that hard if you have a good amount of practice. So this is my XOR gate. To this gate, what inputs am I passing? Let's read about the inputs. The first is A NAND B. So I need to draw a NAND gate. A NAND gate basically looks like this. It is an AND gate with a curve over here, and then there's a circle at the end. Okay, what inputs do I have to pass? I have to pass A and I have to pass B to this NAND gate. Okay, and it goes over here. It goes to one of the inputs. What is the other input? The other input is the not of not B NAND C. So first you do not B NAND C, and then you will do not. What does not B NAND C mean? So I will have again a NAND gate over here. And then to that gate, what do I pass? I pass the value of C and the value of not B. For not, what you do is that you have a triangle. Sorry, you have a triangle. You could put a circle over here, and this is not B NAND C. Okay. After that, this entire thing has to pass through a not. That means I have to put a triangle over here. Okay, and then I pass it over here. I hope this is clear. A NAND B, which goes to the XOR gate. The other input to the XOR gate is basically not B NAND C, and the entire thing is not. Okay. Next, it says that complete the truth table from the given logic expression. Now, whenever logic expressions are given like these, I often like to break them down. So I can see that one of the major sections of my like logic expression is this part, A NAND B. So let me call this as P. I'm just assigning them to anything. On the other hand, I will have not B NAND C. I'm going to assign this to Q, and the entire thing, like after the not value, it will be R. Okay, so I'm going to create 3 other tables in the working space. PQR. Now remember, the working, actually it does not have any marks. Only the thing that matters is the final marks. So even if you show this, or if you have other ways to work out it mentally, you can do it, but I would recommend this method. So let's go and do this. Okay, the p values. Now how do I get the p values? The p values are A NAND B. Remember, NAND is the opposite of AND. So AND gives you 1 when the outputs are, when both the inputs are 1, the output is 1. So NAND would only give you 0 when both the inputs are 1. When A and B both are 1, the output would be 0. So it would only be 0 over here, and rest of all of them, it would be 1. Look, very simple to do if you think about it this way. Okay, think about it. And it gives you a 1 when both are 1 and 1. NAND is the opposite, so it would give you 0 when both are 1. Otherwise, it would always give you 1. Okay, this is how I get the value of P. Otherwise, you can do that as well. So 0 and 0 and would be 0, so the NAND would be 1. 0 and 1, 0 and 0 again, so it would be 1. 0 and 1 and is 0, so the NAND is 1. If you do not know the NAND function, what you do is that you find AND function and put it through a NOT gate, which basically reverses the input. Now you have Q. Q is not B NAND C. Now again, you have a NAND gate, but this time it is not B. For not B, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change all of these values of B. 0 would be 1, 0 is 1, 1 is 0, 1 is 0, 0 is 1, 0 is 1, 1 is 0, 1 is 0. So I've got these values. Now I just got to do the same thing, the NAND between this and the C values. 1 and 0. What would the NAND of that be? That would be 1. 1 and 1 would be 0. 0 and 0 would again be a 1. 0 and 1 is 1. 1 and 0 is 1. 1 and 1 is 0. 0 and 0 is again a 1. And 0 and 1 is again a 0 and 1 would again be a 1. Now what is R? R is basically the NOT of the Q values. So the opposite of that. So 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. Right? 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. Now how do we determine the final values? This is basically the final values determined by the XOR of P and R. XOR values of P and R. That means right now I can ignore these values. I'm just going to erase all of them so that I can ignore them easily. P and R. So how do I get the values of XOR? XOR is a gate which will return you 1 when both of them are not the same. So for example, it's 1 and 0. They're not the same, so output is 1. Okay. If you have 1 and 1, they're the same, so output is 0. 1 and 0 not same, output is 1. 1 and 0 not same, output is 1. 1 and 0 not same, output is 1. 1 and 1, it would give me 0. And 0 and 0, the output is same, so 0. And 0 and 0, the output is same, so again it would be 0. I hope this is clear. Have a look at both of these parts of the question. Take a minute to go through them. Repeat the video if you want to, but please make sure to understand this because every paper has this for at least 9 or 10 marks. And it's very easy to score if you have a lot of practice. All right, now we'll move on to the final question, which is the 15 marker question and one of the most important questions of this paper. All right, now we'll be moving on to the 15 marker question of this paper, which is question number 10. This question will take time throughout this question. We'll read the question in detail. And in the paper, I would recommend that you at least leave 30 to 40 minutes for this paper, for this question specifically. Okay. A sports club uses a 6-character alphanumeric membership code to identify each member of a club. So basically, we have a sports club, and in that every member he has a 6-character alphanumeric. That means a combination of letters and numbers code to identify each member of the club. The one-dimensional array member ID is used to store the unique membership of the club members. So all of the 6 characters is stored in the 1D array. The 2D array name is used to store the names of the club members. The first and the last name of each member will be stored in separate array elements. After that, what it says is the system can store details for a maximum of 1,000 members. It cannot store for more than 1,000 members. The position of any member's data is same in both the arrays. For example, the data in index 2 of the member ID belongs to the data. So in both, for example, if I go in the 10th position in the member ID, that member ID belongs to the person who's in the 10th position in the name array as well. And the variable new ID is used to input a new membership code. Write a program that meets the following requirements. First of all, it has to provide a menu that offers the choices, which include inputting a new member, outputting a list of membership codes, and first and last names, so stopping. Input and validate a response to the menu. So whatever there's an input, we have to validate it. After that, when inputting the new member, input a new membership code and check that it contains 6 characters. If the user selects option 1 of inputting a new member, we have to check that does it follow the membership code and check it contains 6 characters. If it is 6 characters, you have to check that is it unique, like basically compared to all the other previous stores. If it is only unique, then we accept it. If it is not unique, then we need to ensure that we re-enter the code. Must be entered and checked again. Okay, must be entered and checked again. If the code is not unique, it is first. If the code is unique. It is stored in the first available space in the appropriate array, and the new membership is required, and the new member is required to enter the first name, the last name, which is stored in the corresponding location of the appropriate array. When outputting a list of the membership codes and names, output for each member their membership code, their first name and last name. The program will continue until the stop option is selected on the menu. You must use pseudocode and program code and add comments to explain how your code works. Now, I would recommend using pseudocode because program code, there's a very high chance that you cut marks for your syntax. Had it been a computer, it would be way easier to do this in program code and very shorter, but on this, it would be very difficult. You do not need to declare any arrays, variables, or constants. Assume this has already been done. You do not need to initialize the data in the arrays, and you do not need to initialize any values of variables used if appropriate. All the inputs and outputs must contain suitable messages. Now, for the declaration part, obviously, I'm not going to declare the member ID or the name, but what I'm rather going to do is I'm going to declare some of the variables that I will use of my own. So first of all, I'm going to have two indexes, declare an index for check, which is basically used when you're checking that is the code entered unique or no. That will be an index for check, and another index that you will need is an index for out. Index for out, which is an integer. Okay, moving on. I would need another one to basically store the code, or basically the membership code that has been entered by the user. So to declare the answer, I need to store that, declare as an integer. After that, I also need to store that declare a code which is a string, declare a code which will be nothing but it's rather a string. Okay, declare the answer as an integer. Now the code will basically store, the code is where you will store the input, and the answer is rather used to check whether you have inputted 1, 2, or 3, that is a selection. The code is where the user will input the membership code, and after that you have something else which is called as declare used. Now this used is basically, it is a boolean which is used to check whether or not that code has been used before in the array or no. Okay, and I do not need to initialize any array, but if you initialize, it's not like you're going to get cut marks for that because it does not require. I'm not doing it. Although the marking scheme says you can do it, but you won't be awarded any extra marks for that. All right, now often it's a good idea to leave some space here. You have a lot of space on this paper, leave some space here just in case you declare any additional variables when you do the program. Now, first of all, we didn't understand that it says repeat. The program will continue until the stop option on the menu is selected. So we do not know how many times the program will run, but it has to run at least once. So that's why we're going to use a repeat until loop in this program to start off this program. Repeat until loop. All right. After that, now obviously I need to add comments along the way. So this repeat until loop, what I want to do is that display the menu choices. Display the menu choices. Okay. Now displaying the menu choices, obviously I would need to use output. So output, what do I need to output? Enter 1. What is 1 for? To input a new member. To input new member. New, okay, input new member. 2 to output the member codes. 2 to output the member codes along with first and the last name, or 3 to stop. Okay, so then what does it do? After that, after you've displayed the menu choices, again you want to run another repeat into loop here, which will repeat until the appropriate answer has been entered. We have asked this. Then we'll have another part which will, what is this part going to do? It's going to input the menu choice. Along with this part with the menu choice, you need a validation. With validation, okay, we need to validate whether the input is correct or no. So we're going to use a repeat until loop again over here, another repeat until loop, repeat. We also use it to input the answer. We've already provided them with a prompt message. So also use it to input the answer. Now, what I'm trying to say over here is if the answer is less than 1 or the answer is greater than 3, then because you want to check that it should be between 1 and 3. If it's less than 1 or greater than 3, then you're going to say output. You're going to tell them what the error is and then try again. So you can say you must input 1 2 1 2 or 3, and also please try again later. If he basically does not, please try again. That is if it is false. Now till when will we repeat this? When will we repeat? So this is going to be end if. Until when do we want to repeat this loop? Until the answer is greater than or equal to 1. Answer is greater than or equal to 1, and it is answer is less than or equal to 3. Alright, let me just provide with what I've done. So first of all, I've declared the variables, which includes index check, index out, answer, which is for the input that the user provides, a code along with being used. How many pages do I have? I have 2 pages. My handwriting is surprisingly big on this, otherwise it would be way smaller. Declare code as a string and declare used as a boolean as well. Okay. I have a repeat, started with the repeat until loop, and I've asked the outputted the choices which are 1, 2, or 3. And then I again put a repeat until loop, which is to input the answer until an appropriate answer has been entered. What is the terminating condition of the repeat until loop? Until the answer is greater than 1 or and it should be less than 3, greater than 1 and less than 3. Okay. Now we have another comment, which is the user he chooses to input member details. User chooses to input member details. Now you're getting to the part that if he chooses 1 or if he chooses 2, etc. Be very careful of the indentation over here. You need to make sure that you're using appropriate indentation, which is the aligning of the code. Okay. Now that is if the answer is equivalent to 1, basically, how does the condition work? One, it only works if the answer value is equivalent to 1. If the answer is equivalent to 1, then what do we want to do? Then again, there will be another repeat loop, which will repeat until when? Until the appropriate things have been entered. So we're going to say repeat until loop. And the first thing that we do here is basically used should be declared to false. You will quickly understand that why we declared used to false, because used is a condition which checks whether you know whether that like the code that has been entered, has it already been used or no. If it has been used, it is not repeated. It cannot be repeated again. Then what do we do? We're going to say output enter a new 6-character membership code. We're telling the user to enter a new 6-character membership code. So we're asking the user for a membership code of how many characters? Of 6 characters. Membership code. And then what do we want to input? We want to input the code as per our variable, which is code. Then what you're going to do is you're going to check if the length of the code is not 6. First of all, remember that if it is not 6, then it won't proceed. So if the length of the code, okay, length supposed to be in capital, sorry, because it is a function, it has to be in capital. If the length of the code, if it is not 6, then what do we do? Then output, output that the code must contain 6 characters. Please try again. Code must contain 6 characters. Please try again. Okay. Now that is if the length is, otherwise if it does contain 6 letters, then we need to check for other things over here. Now in this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my index check to 1. My index, basically because I want to check all of the elements, I would start with the index check value to 1. The index check is a variable that I declared before. Now in this, I want to loop it only until I've found an empty string and which is not used. So I'm going to have a while loop, while the member the member ID, which is an array that has already been declared of what, of index check, while the member ID of index check is not, while the member ID of the index check is not an empty, and what is the other condition, and not used, do. Now I'm pretty sure you're confused that why, what is the point of this statement. So if you go through it carefully, while the member ID of index check, that means I'm going to that, I'm accessing the member ID which is stored at the first position. It is not an empty string. It is not empty. That means it is being used. If it is empty, if it is, it should not be empty. It means it contains some of the member ID, and it is not used. Not used basically means that it is used is true if it has been used. Use is false if it is not. I want to do this code. Now what will this code do? If the code is equivalent of the member of ID, if my current code that the user has entered, the member ID, no, okay. If the code is equivalent to the member ID of index check, then if it is equal, then what do? Then used would actually be true. Basically, in that sense, that means it has already been used. Used is true, and output, what do you want to tell the user? That this code has already been used. Please try. Please try again later. Let me see if I can reduce indentation because I have absolutely no space on this side. Okay, let me see if I can reduce this indentation. Even this part would go here then. And so would this part go here. It has to be aligned with this. I think it has to be a bit, okay, that is fine because it is still running under the while loop. Output this has anchor, this code. Otherwise, if it is, otherwise what do? Else, else index check is equivalent of index check plus 1. That is, you want to go to the next one and check whether that is empty and has not been used. Index check is equivalent of index check plus 1. There would be an end if over here, and there would be a end while. End while. Again, what does the while loop do? While the member ID of index check, it is not an empty string. So I'm accessing the array element for which one? For the first one. And I'm checking, is it an empty or no? If it is not empty, it means it contains some data and it is also not used. That means the used value is currently false, that which we set to initialize before. Then we run this while loop. In the while loop, what we do is that we're checking if the code that the user has entered is equivalent of the member ID of index check. That means, is it equal to the first one? If it is, then we set the used to true. Output, this code has already been used, and tries again. And if it is not equal to, then what we do is that index check is equivalent of index check plus 1. And if, and while. Okay. I hope this is clear that why have we exactly used this. As I finish the code, I will be explaining how the code works in detail so that if you do not understand. And remember, there are certain places where you can add comments because comments, they essentially just have to be there. So I might not add some comments due to space limitations, but if you all think that you have to add some comment, you have please you are welcome to and you should actually do it. Okay. Now there was one condition that okay, we have done and while index check is equal to index checks plus one. In the same else condition from here, I've done the while loop. I want to continue now. If not used, that means if the used value is currently false. If the used value it is currently false, that means the position we are at right now it is false. Then what do we do is that member id of index check. We are accessing that array element and we are storing what are we storing? We are storing the code in it. Okay, then we say output enter your first name. Where do we want to enter the first name? Enter your first name. So where do you want to store this first name? Input. We're going to store this in name index check comma 1. Basically we're going to the same table which is the name, and where do you want to store it? Index check comma 1. That is the first name. The column would be 1 and the row would be the index check as specified. The next one it would be output. We're asking the user for the last name. Enter last name. Okay, these are called as the prompt messages. Then we also use it to input. It would be saved where name index check comma 2. I hope this is clear. And what do we do after that is endif. So endif of this part. After that endif of this part, and then we need another endif to store to basically remove the previous endif. So endif of that. And after that endif we need to because we are going to we were repeating, so we need to repeat until the length of the code is 6 and it is not used. Until the length, no, okay, again I have to make sure length is in capital. So the length of the code, this is my terminating condition. If the length of the code is 6 and not used before, not used, then I would repeat, I would end if. After that, think I have one more thing, that if the answer is 1. So I also need to end this condition, that if my answer is 1, and if. Now we'll move on to the second part. The second part is if the answer is 2. Yeah, I assume that lack out of space, but obviously the handwriting would be much more smaller had I done it in paper. If answer is equivalent of 2, then what do we do? Answer 2 is basically for outputting. So my index out, it would basically be 1. Index out would be 1. Then remember the data is stored in such a format that whenever you come to the point where like it is empty, that means there are no members after that. They are arranged in order. There are no members after a certain point. So I'm going to have a while loop, because while the member ID table of the index out is not, it's basically not an do this. So what do you mean by this? Basically, I'm going to the member ID table and I'm ensuring that that place it is not empty. If it is empty, then I should stop iteration. But if it is not empty, then I'm going to iterate this. Now, what do I need to iterate? Output the membership ID. Output the membership ID, or the membership code. In fact, why do we call it ID? The code, it would be comma the member ID. I need to go to the array and then the value would be index out. I hope this is clear. Index out, it would be over here. Okay, then output, what do I need to output over here? I need to output the name, the first name. The first name, it would be somewhere over here. The table is called as name, and in that table I need to go to the index out value. Index out, that means like which user I'm accessing. One is the column, which is the first column. The last thing is output last name. Name index out comma 2. And then what happens is once I've output of them, index out will be index out is equivalent of index out plus 1, which basically means that I can go to the next element, and I also have to put a end while. After end while, what do I need is an end if to ensure that if answer is equivalent of 2. So end if. Now, if you remember that we had started the program on a note that it is a repeat program, right? So I will also need to end this on a repeat note, which is until the answer is 3. That means until the user decides to stop, you will have to repeat this code. Now I know that this is a pretty long code, and I might not have been so clear on this device, but I still hope that I have helped to through up the code. You need to ensure that you do this code by yourself so that you can get a clear idea of what it is. I'm going to explain once again. I have an index check and index of integers. The answer stores the user like twice 1, 2, 3. The code is the entered and the used is a boolean. Repeat. Repeat, the first thing is display the many choices. We are asking you outputting enter 1 to input new numbers, input 2 to input the membership code with the first and last name, or you can also input 3 to stop. Input the many choice with the validation. After we do is repeat again. Now in this case, we are asking that input the answer. If the answer is less than 1 or less than 3, we are basically checking if the answer is in the correct criteria. If it's less than 1 or less than 3, then you ask them to input again. And we do this until the answer is greater than 1 and it is less than 3. If the answer is 1, then what do we do is that set repeat false and use to false. Use to false basically means that the current code that has been entered, it has not been used previously. Output enter 6-character code membership code. We input the code, and if the length is code is not 6, then output this. That means if it is not 6, then we're giving them an error and we're not going to proceed further. But if it is, then what you do is you set the index check to 1. Now you need to check that the code, it does not repeat anywhere throughout the entire program. So I have a while loop here, which is member ID. For example, again, I'm going to explain member ID index check is not an empty string. For example, the first one, if it is an empty string and my not used, so my use is false, then I would not go to this code. But let's say it is not empty and I'm currently at false. The only reason of setting not used is to ensure that this runs at least once. So I've set my use false as well. So what this will do is it will repeat until I have found the empty one, and also which is the used is not false. Now how to decide if the used is false or not? If the code that the user enters is equivalent of the member ID index check, which is the value 1, let's say, then if they're equating, then the used is true. That means this code has been used, and output the code has already been used. Please try again later. Otherwise, if it has not been used, then I just increase my index check to index check plus 1, because I need to check the next one. Okay, so that in the next loop I'll check the next one. End if end while. Once I've gotten, like I'm doing this while until I found the empty one. If I've not used, that means I find something which has not been used, then I assign it over here. That is member ID index check is code, asking for the first name, then input the first name, output for the asking for the last name, input the last name, end if. And overall, this part repeats until the code is fixed and you have entered something which has not been used. On the other hand, now, if the answer is 2, then you set your index out to 1, while the member ID index out is not an empty string. So basically, I'm going to keep repeating this until I find a member ID which is empty. So that means there are no more members after this, and I don't need to iterate it. And then I start iterating, output the membership code, where I'm accessing the membership code from the array. So the way to access an array is the name of the array, which is member ID. In the brackets, squared brackets, you would point at what index you want to access at. Output the first name, then output the last name. The index out, I will increment it so that I can next time proceed to the next one, and while. End if, and overall it is repeated until the answer value it is 3. So you want to repeat until it stops. And by doing this question, we have reached the end of this program. I hope this video was really helpful to you, and especially for the computer science students appearing in May June 25. I know this video is not the best one of mine because it is difficult to write the entire course and programs here, and also it's a first P2 video, but I'll try to improve in my next videos, and you'll get to discover more helpful and amazing videos. So stay tuned for that. Apart from that, if you have any questions or any doubts regarding this video or any other videos, please feel free to comment them down below. If you have any video suggestions or topic suggestions for revision, that is, you could post a video, you could post the comment, and I'll try to make a video for that. Again, any questions, please ask them without hesitation. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more helpful content, especially for the May June 25 series. I'll see you then in the next video. Till then, take care, bye, and good luck.